As marketers, there is one thing that we have to do a lot, and that thing is making decisions. Decision making is a very underrated skill for marketers, and I want to help you making good enough choices both in your personal and professional life, which is why we have enlisted the amazing Emma to teach us exactly how to do that. So all is left to say for me is buckle up and get ready, and may today's class begin.
Hello, everybody. I recognise a couple of people in the chat. So hello to people I know, but also hello to people that I don't know. It's really good of you to come along and listen to my session today. So tiny little bit of background from me. So I have worked in tech and design for 26 years, almost 27 years now. I've spent the last 15 years working in professional design studios. My background and experience has been user experience design, information architecture, and taxonomy. So my main specialism is generally how people find their way through digital spaces. But one of the things that I have fallen down a rabbit hole, I think is pretty safe to say, is how people make choices and the architecture of how people go about making choices. So what I've been doing this year is starting to actually dive into that in a bit more detail and break that apart and looking at that from a strategic point of view about how organizations build things with bad choices built into them. But what I've done with this talk is I've taken everything that I've kind of learned across the years and I've put it into something that I use myself to help me better understand and make better choices. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Quick thing about questions. I'm going to be sort of splitting the screen ever so slightly, so I can't see this. I'm going to move my screens around so I'll be able to see the questions, but there will be points where I will stop and I will encourage you to ask questions if you have them. But if you think of any, then pop them in the chat, and as I get a chance to breathe, aka stop for a drink, then I will pick some of the questions out and respond to them as we go through. There is going to be a couple of downloads or worksheets that are going to be available that I'll talk about as we go through it, and there's also going to be a link to a quiz that you can take to better understand your choice making style about halfway through. So let's start. So I consider myself at the moment a transformation strategist because that's largely the work that I have been doing for this year as I've been working on strategies and research pieces for organisations that are looking to do digital transformation. I'm also a maker of slightly less questionable choices, although not all the time. I do sometimes question my ability to make a good choice. So I'm going to start by taking you on a little bit of a journey and walking you through a story because I love starting a talk with a good story. So, choices are a little bit like mountains. If you don't know what you're doing or you don't know where you're going, they can be a little bit difficult to navigate. And sometimes when you are with a choice, it can feel like you are below the cloud and you can't see the summit because of the cloud that's covering it, or you can't get enough perspective from it. So you could be standing at the bottom of this path looking up and not being able to see anything. And you've also heard of the concept of making a mountain out of a molehill. Well, sometimes it's the other way around as well, but what you think you're climbing could be that big summit, but in reality you're climbing something that's a lot smaller, and sometimes it's a bit challenging to get a bit of perspective around how you're making those choices. And sometimes you're left wondering, are you hoping your choice will be as lucky as a double rainbow, or is it going to be an absolute disaster? Now, I'm cheating ever so slightly because the images of the mountains that I've shown you are actually part of a mountain range in Switzerland called the Furka Pass. And the reason why I've put these in here is because there's a little bit of a story behind it. A while ago, probably about 18 years ago, when I was with my ex, he hated flying. So most of our holidays would involve us traveling by car across Europe. And that actually meant that we would kind of slow down a little bit and see the scenery that was going on around us. That is when we weren't arguing with one another because he wouldn't read the instructions that I was giving him about which direction to travel in, which meant we turned left when we meant to turn right and right when we meant to turn left, and there would be a lot of turning around and going back again, which, is a little bit like making a choice. However, on this one occasion, we were driving across Europe, and the Furka Pass was actually part of our planned route. We'd driven from the Nürburgring in Germany all the way down to Andermatt in Switzerland, which was at the start of the pass, and we drove up through the pass. Now, this is a little bit, I wouldn't say pre-internet, because it was about 15, 20 years ago, but it wasn't as prevalent as social media is now at being able to show all of these images. So we weren't quite sure what we were going to expect. And just before, where it's pointed at the Furka Pass, further up the road, there's actually a glacier, and we weren't expecting to see the glacier. So what you see when you're traveling along these kind of winding roads, there's lots of things that you weren't expecting, largely because you're slowing down to enjoy the journey, or the journey becomes part of the actual holiday. Well, the process I'm going to take you through today is a little bit like that. So instead of jumping on an airplane and flying to Switzerland, you're going to be taking a little bit more of a long and windy road. I'm also going to be throwing in some really weird random facts that you're not going to expect, because that's the way my brain works. So the Belvedere Hotel that you're looking at the moment right here, if you are fans of Wes Anderson films, the Belvedere Hotel is what the Grand Budapest Hotel was based on. And if you go Google the Belvedere Hotel and you see the front picture of it, and then you go and look at the picture of the hotel in the Grand Budapest Hotel, you will see that the two are very, very similar. Also, you'll see the rolling burnouts, because this road is a little bit of a speed freaks road, which is why my ex really wanted to drive down it. Side note, don't really feel safe in a car with a guy that drives really, really fast, and you're sort of sitting on the outside edge of something. So, but I enjoyed the scenery. I'm also going to throw in some movie quotes. So this one's pretty apt. If life moves pretty fast, if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. So that leads me very, very nicely into the thing that we're actually really going to be talking about today, which is what I call the Unperfect Method. We're complete with a very unperfect, slightly blurry photo taken at a concert, and bonus points to anybody that can actually work out from what little information you can see on that screen what concert it actually was. However, the Unperfect Method, we start with, what does good look like? The reason why I start the Unperfect Method with what does good look like is because it's a step back. The thing with perfectionism is that you are trying so hard to achieve a standard that you are rarely, if ever, going to achieve. And when you start to break down why you haven't achieved something that's perfect, the reaction from you is more likely to go into a space where you are thinking about what went wrong, the failure, everything that was bad about it. So I thought, actually, why don't we just reframe it? Another reason for reframing it this way is, if you've worked in professional design studios, or you want to work in professional design studios, you're going to hear that question an awful lot when you work in an agile environment. You'll get people saying to you, what does good look like? So if you want to get something out the door as part of an MVP or part of a first thin slice, when you're putting something out ready to test, you're often asked that question, because you're not looking for perfection. You are not looking for anything that's going to make it really, really hard to get it out the door. You're being asked to say and quantify what's good about this thing, or what would make it good when we put it out there. What can we learn from it that's good? So I've honed in on what good looks like, because it reframes that narrative about failure. Failure is actually quite good, because you learn an awful lot from it, but you can also get tied up in it. And if you're a little bit like me, because I do go down that route, I will torture myself relentlessly about why I failed and how I failed. So this has been an exercise for me in helping to get a better grip of understanding of what's going on with me. Also, if you know what good looks like, you can borrow from the wonderful Lin-Manuel Miranda, and also Hamilton. And if you stand for nothing, Burr, what will you fall for? So if you know what good looks like, then you'll know what your unbreakability of something becomes. It also means that you stop and take a short breath of a single moment. So when you start looking at good, you are looking at little small moments of things. You're not looking at the big picture. You're not looking at like the entirety of a holiday. You're looking for small little things in a moment that you really, really enjoy. And this is a slight hint about the previous concert slide, because these are my favorite DJs, giving a little bit more away for it. But this is their motto, and this is a motto that I've tried to live by ever since I heard it, because I think it's a really important thing. Instead of looking at something big and expansive and perfect, you're looking for the good in a little small moment. And when you start looking for those little small moments of goodness, life becomes a little bit more enjoyable because you relish more in those moments. So what does that mean? So I'm going to take you through what I call the good fours. So this talk is in two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about good fours, and then I'll come on to what the second part is a little bit later. But what I call the good fours is 4 things that you need to look at when you are looking at good. Hence, good fours. It's good for you. Little play on words there. I know, terrible with the pun. The first good four is personal. And I put this photo up because I look at it, and every time I look at it, all I can see is the big double chin that I've got before I lost some weight. And I really don't like this photo. It's a very professional photo, but I just see everything that's wrong about it. But so I put it up here to actually try and challenge myself to find what was good about this. I had amazing lipstick. My hair looked fantastic. And oh yeah, the shirt that I'm wearing, I made myself. So I'm really quite proud of it. So there are good things in there that are really important. But why I'm asking you that is, what does good look like for you? In a day, in a moment, what does good look like for you? And if you stop for a second and take a brief moment back and think about something in a situation, instead of looking at a day and thinking about all the things that you've got to do, all the things on your task list, just stop and ask yourself, what would make today good? I'm not asking you what would make it perfect. I'm not saying, what would make it absolutely terrible, but what's one moment in the day where you could find that would make it good? And I've started adding up those little good things myself, and I'll come on to those in a little while. But stopping and asking yourself, what does good look like for you? When was the last time someone asked you that? When was the last time you asked you that? I think it's a really valuable question to actually ask yourself that in a moment, what does good look like for you? The second of the good fours is product. Now, this is where it can get a little bit confusing, but I'm going to kind of make it kind of simple for you. A product is a thing that brings you money. Now, a product could be a career, because that is a product of all your education, of all your skills, of all your knowledge. It could be services that you provide if you are self-employed and you're a service-based business, or it could be products. So if you're a product-based business, it could be products. Now, what you're looking for in what does good look like with your product, so what makes your product good, it can be the things like, what are the skills that you've got that you enjoy using, that you really enjoy working with? What are the good things about your services? What makes them good? What makes them good in comparison to the way that somebody else delivers them? Because I noticed there's somebody in the chat that's joined today that's also a UXer. So what makes my UX skills good compared to what makes your UX skills good is always going to be different, and that brings an element of uniqueness to what we can provide. But stopping for a hot moment and thinking about what does good look like in your product space, of what's your product, it's the thing that you own, it's the thing that you get to be proud of. So it's being able to articulate what makes that good for you. Then we come on to parish. Again, another concert photo. I don't go to many concerts anymore. I have crippling social anxiety, and actually turning up to this particular concert was pretty big because I went on my own. It was at the O2. It was absolutely huge, and it took quite a lot of psyching up for me to get there. But what do I mean by parish? So your parish is not just your community. Parish is what you surround yourself with. So I kind of played with that word because I live in a village, we have a parish council, and there are people around me that I consider to be my parish. So I don't have family, I have a dog and 2 cats, so they are my family, I suppose. But I have friends, and they are valuable to my existence and to what they bring into my life, and hopefully what I bring into theirs. Your peers, so your colleagues if you work in a job, or your peers if you're self-employed, because there'll be people that you work with or respect or value or bring contribution to you potentially professionally. And then you've got your community. So if you are self-employed, or if you're building a community, a product community, something like that, then you are going to have a community of people. But these are all different people that you surround yourself with, and they are your parish. So that is why I'm differentiating between community and parish. So what you're looking for here is what's good for your parish. Now, if you're self-employed, or you've got a product-based business, the way you're going to find this out is good old-fashioned user research. You're going to go and talk with them and understand what is it about what you're bringing to the table that is good for them. If it's your friends, your family, or your peers, it's about having that dialogue with them to understand, what is it that is good in that space, helping you to understand what your boundaries need to look like, because again, those are really important. Now, the fourth four is a little bit of a play. It is a tiny little bit of con, because actually it's place and time. So what we end up with is a sense of the importance of what's good now, what's good next, and what's good later. Because it's really important for us to get a sense of what's good right now. But to get our growth, to get a sense of what we can bring to the table next, or where we want to go to next, this is breaking it into the sense of, well, what do I want good for me to look like next? What do I want to aim for? What's my personal development in that space? And then later is a little bit further into the distance. Now, the reason why I started breaking this down is because I am a person that really struggles with goals. I'm the person that can go, yeah, my goal is this at the start of the year. And I could tell you 12 months time, I'm like, that was funny. Wasn't it a really good laugh to just write that down and think that that was going to be my goal I was going to achieve? I write goals down, and generally it becomes something that never happens. So I needed something that was a little bit more fluid for me, and something that was going to trick my monkey brain into being able to actually get some kind of growth out of it. So by slicing it up into that space, and not saying in 12 months time I'm going to achieve this, I've sliced it into a space and language and structure that I feel more comfortable working with. And it makes a lot more sense when you then run it into something that looks a little bit like this, a nice little handy grid. So technically it's good fours, but you're working in grids of 3. So what would good look like for you now personally? Now, part of the reason why I started looking at this at the start of this year was because I was really, really struggling with anxiety and stress, and a sense of identity. I've been a contractor for most of my 27 years of career, 26 at the time. And last year, I think my last contract ended, and the market out there has been, quite frankly, pretty terrible. So I have been struggling psychologically with where I'm going next. I found the change of it really destabilizing. So I took it back to basics, where I haven't had an awful lot of money, and not kind of pinning things down to what I'm going to achieve based on money. So for me, I started looking at what would a good day look like for me? Well, realistically, a good day looks like having a good routine in the morning, which involves walking my dog Bertie, who you might have seen appear right at the start of the walk, because he does have a tendency to appear unannounced. He's not here now. And spending time with him, and having good quality things to read. So a really good book, or a really good audio book, because I prefer audiobooks these days. So it's those kinds of things that helped me to get a greater degree of perspective as to what was going on in my life at that moment in time. It gave me a bit more control without there being the need to worry about money and things that were going on in that space. Next is what would good look like for me personally, next, and then later. And I'm hoping the next slide is going to load, because I'm looking at it on the preview, and the preview is not showing up. Oh, it is going to load. There we go. Okay, excellent. So we're going to share with you this grid. So you're going to get this nice little worksheet yourself that you can use to work through your own good fours. So this is what mine roughly looks like. And this was me popping things in about 15 minutes before the call, because I've got them written down somewhere and I couldn't find it, which is typical for me at the moment. But for example, as you can see, for me, what good would look like for me is sleep. I realize I am an absolute miserable, grumpy human being that loses all perspective and rationality if I don't get a good night's sleep. Time with Bertie, my dog. The favourite part of my day is collapsing on the sofa in the evening with something to binge on TV and Bertie sleeping on my lap, which is a bit challenging because he's a 37-kilogram golden retriever. But he's warm, he's cuddly, and it is the favourite part of my day is getting to cuddle with the dog. Books are also really important to me, and I've got a Kindle loaded with books, and I've got an Audible library again full of books. So that, though, if I've got those things, that's what's good for me right now. But next, I want to get to financial freedom. Clearing off my debts, not having to worry about where my money is coming from, and a passion project that I am working out in my head at the moment. I'm not going to say too much about, because if I talk about it, I know I'm going to jinx myself. But that's been filling me with joy over the last few weeks, is thinking about that. But then if you look at things like the product, so for me, it's sustainability. I want sustainability to be able to bring income into my business and into my world, so that I'm not reliant on contracts. So you can see that this is what a structure of the Good Force looks like. It's really, really simple. That's why I intended it to be that way. And it does play a really, really important part in how you make choices, in case you're wondering why I'm going down this route first. So this is at about halfway point. So I'm going to pause for a moment and I'm going to ask if anybody's got any questions. Not seeing any questions? I'll give you a moment. Next could be next could be like 12 weeks. It's up to you to set the time frame that works for you, and that is generally why I didn't put time frames on it, because for example, the personal for me could run shorter. So now could be like this week, next could be next week or next month, and later could be next year. Like there's a variability on the timings for it. Whereas with the product space of how I'm building my business, that needs to be slightly more structured to think about how I'm bringing in money. I am still terrible with goals. I cannot work to quarters. It's just an absolute disaster for me. And with Parish, I think for me is I'm talking about Parish from a business sense along here, but for the in terms of being able to dig into things like Parish around my friends, one of the things that I did this year is I don't really have any friends locally. Most of my friends are spread out throughout the UK, but a really close friend of mine moved to the same county, helpful, and actually only about 20 minutes away. And she moved a couple of years ago, and I've been like really remiss at not reaching out to her. And turns out she's been struggling a bit, and together we've been kind of propping each other up. We're both dealing with she's got an ADHD diagnosis, and I'm trying to go through an ADHD and autism diagnosis, and we're both kind of propping each other up, and that's made a huge impact to how I'm feeling personally. So it's really kind of helped me to get a grip on that kind of thing. But it very much depends on the horizontal as to how you want to play that. But yeah, so the intervals are very fluid for me, but you might want to make them a little bit more structured. But that's the beauty of this. You get to do that. You can make up what those intervals should look like. And thank you, girl. That's really kind of you. And yes, Fab, I did feel a little bit like putting a proverbial cardigan over my head if there's no questions, but never mind. Feel free to, if people are thinking of questions, pop them in the chat, and as I pause, I will answer them for you. So I'm going to move into the second part of the talk now, which is the architecture of a choice. This is, I love architecture of buildings. And when I was Googling this, I initially thought this was Norman Foster, but it's not Norman Foster. It's another architectural practice, whose name I can't remember. Terrible with names. But it is King's Cross Station in London, when they did the re-engineering of it. And there's a really great story behind it. If you go and Google it, there's a really great article on The Guardian about the importance of big metal roofs in terms of the British Industrial Revolution, which I found fascinating. So anyway, so the architecture of a choice. I would be remiss if I didn't start the architecture of a choice conversation to talk about the thing that drives me up the wall, and it is Netflix, in all honesty. Yes, they do bring some really great programs, like The Crown and Bridgerton, but they are one of the platforms that created a concept that is leading to a problem in general with how we all make choices. So kind of pointing the finger of blame ever so slightly on the concept that they've designed and delivered makes it really, really hard for us as humans to make choices. And I'm going to show you why this is a problem. But I'm just going to take a brief second to ask you to stop and think of, when you go on to Netflix, if you don't know what you want to watch, so if you don't know that Bridgerton has dropped new episodes and you really, really want to watch them, are you able to go onto Netflix and within 10 minutes, because I'm going to give you a time frame, be able to find something that you want to watch? Or do you end up just scrolling through, watching the clips, thinking, hey, I've watched the whole thing now, and then moving on, and then giving up after 30 minutes and going, you know what, I'm done now? I do that, and I know a lot of other people do that. Answer: it depends. Yes, it does. You always go to your watch list, but then end up going all the way through them. Yep. Hey, Liv can find something. Okay. What's going on there? I'm going to explain the effect that's happening when you go through the choice mechanism here and what happens. So there are two types of choice styles. So you've got systemizers and maximizers, and you're probably looking at those words going, oh my God, big words, big scary. And if you are like one of my friends and I say the word maximizers, he say that word hurts my teeth. So I use the term good enough and perfectionist. So there are two ways that you can make choices, and one of them is effectively a good enough choice, and one of them is a perfectionist choice. And if you want to know which one you are, I've got great news for you. I've got a quiz that's based on the research that helps to determine which of these two are, and I've built it into a nice handy quiz that you can work through. It's modernized slightly from the research that it came from because it referenced cassette tapes, and there might be people on here that don't know what cassette tapes are. So you can go and find out which one you are. And Fab, thank you very much. You have dropped the link in the chat. Person asking what the font is, it's Sharpie Pro from can't remember who it's from, but Google Sharpie Pro, and that's where the font's from. Now, perfectionists. I'm going to give you 3 examples of what perfectionists making choices, what happens and why they're perfectionists, and then I'll do the same with good enough choices. So, perfectionists, you need more information to make a choice. I don't mean a little bit, I mean you have to have everything. And you are not even looking at it from a sense of being able to narrow it down. You want to make the perfect choice out of everything that's available. And if you can't make that perfect choice, then you are going to take a lot longer to make that choice. So you'll be presented with absolutely everything, and then you will procrastinate over it for ages, and you will struggle to make a choice. And then when you have made the choice, you're going to second guess that choice that you've made, because you will have looked at absolutely everything and you'll be going, but did I make the perfect choice? That's what's happening for most of us when we go into Netflix. Now, I'm a good enough choice maker, which is what got me interested in this and the two differences between it. But I know instinctively when I go into Netflix, it turns me into a perfectionist choice maker, and I feel itchy and jangly, and yeah, I'm not very comfortable, and so I end up giving up and then going watching something else completely different. But that's what happens with perfectionist choice makers. Now, good enough choice makers make choices based on what good looks like to them. So now you're kind of seeing why I want you to understand, why I want you to learn what good looks like for you. Because if you understand what good looks like for you, it makes it much easier for you to make a choice, because you've got a reference point, because you can look at something and with the things they presented in front of you, you can go, but I know that's what good looks like to me. So there was a reason why I was making you do all of those activities first. Good enough choice makers are quick and confident decision makers. So you can look at what's in front of you and you can know instinctively, because of all the built up knowledge that you've got in your head, you can go, yeah, 3 options, I'm going to pick that one. I know it's going to be fine for me. You are less worried about the outcome of the choice that you make. So you're more satisfied with the outcome of your choices. So when you're presented with those things, you often opt for fewer choices, fewer options, and you can make your choices much quicker and much more confidently. Now, the architecture of a choice, I'm not going to go over everything that you need to make a choice, because that would take us absolutely ages, and there's lots of technical language, and even I struggle to get my head around some of it. But the main parts of the architecture of a choice starts with the components that you need to make that choice, and there's 3 parts to it. You have tangible, intangible, and constraints. You're probably going, what do I mean by that? Well, tangible. These are things that are irrefutable. These are things that people really can't question, unless you want to get into the debate about purple and how purple is not a color. Our brains just know what purple is, which just blew my mind recently. And I wish I hadn't been told that. But color is irrefutable. So the color of these slides are, I call it cornflower blue and lemon sherbet. Those are what I call those colors, but yeah, yellow and blue. Flavor, size, shape, price, delivery, fuel, brand. These are all tangible things that you are going to know about. Intangible are things that are subjective. So quality, sustainability, emotions, effort, value, education. So the effort that it might take me to do something after I've made the choice might be completely different to say how much effort Fab needs to do something. The quality of something, how I determine quality is going to be different from, say, how Liv determines quality. So these are things that are a lot more subjective, and they are much more in your space to quantify what you mean by them. But they are still important in considering how you make a choice. Constraints. I love a constraint. When it comes to making a choice, I genuinely love a constraint, because a constraint is like a box that you put things in. So the way that I was lovingly describing this when I was talking to somebody about what I've been working on over the last few years was a bit of a rave reference, which is like big fish, little fish, cardboard box is the way to remember all 3 parts of it. He thought it was hilarious and it kind of stuck in my head, but it's a way of remembering it. But constraint is something that you use to narrow down the choices that you need to make. So budget is usually one of the biggest constraints that you're working with. If you don't have the money to buy a gold-plated watch, then you're going to go for something a little bit more in your price range, but that helps you to narrow down what options you are being presented with. Now, pink and yellow, nice and bright. But you see the grids that I gave you earlier, which was personal, product, parish, now, next, later. That translates now into what the good choices framework looks like. So when you're making a choice, you have the tangible, the intangible, and the constraints. And the timing on this now makes a play into how you make that choice. It doesn't look that great when you look at it like this, but when I show you this, it makes more sense. So I'm going to give you the example of buying a car, because it's the best example I can give you, with the rest of it making sense. So when you go to buy a car, if you ever considered buying a car or something big in that space, the things that you are thinking about when you make the decision to buy something are really first and foremost in your mind. But if you're making a really good choice about the car you're going to buy, you're actually going to be taking into consideration the impact of next and later in your choice. So the tangible things would be things like engine, gearbox, is it manual or automatic, the fuel, do you want petrol, diesel, or EV, the color of it, the brand of it. Then the intangible is going to be things like the quality and reputation, and sustainability and ethics. You might be wondering why I put ethics in there. I would not buy a Tesla because I disagree with the person that owns it, and I would feel unethical contributing to the £53 billion paycheck that he has awarded himself. But the constraints on that would also be budget. I can't afford a Tesla either. So that kind of makes it a little bit, a moot point. But what you're getting with this structure of that information is it enables you to narrow down the choice that you want to pick from. The budget probably being the most important one. It really helps you to keep that kind of thing that you're going to choose really tightened up. However, if you're thinking about this in a bigger thing, then you're thinking about the on-the-road costs of things. So you are thinking about the fuel. Do I want petrol or do I want EV? Is that going to be more affordable for me? Servicing. Do I want to buy a brand new car because the servicing is included in it and then I don't need to worry about it? Or if I'm not going to be buying a brand new car, how much is the servicing realistically going to cost me? Can I afford that every year? The reason why I've got constraints on tax and insurance is for the people that are not in the UK, insurance costs for cars have gone through the roof. It used to cost me about £300 a year to insure my car, and with no accidents or no speeding fines or anything like that on my driving license, my insurance is now close to £1,000. So the insurance has gone through the roof. So when you're looking at buying the car, you're also looking at what's the insurance cost going to be for it. Also tax, if you're buying a brand new car and it's over a certain price in the UK, then the tax for the first couple of years is really, really high. And that can play a really important part on it. And it can also, these things can also impact your later cost making thing on it. So this is what your choice grid looks like. And yes, there is also, in that link that Fab shared with you earlier, you'll get access to both of these grids that you can then play around with. So that is the architecture of a choice. And I'm just going to finally say, a choice isn't a diamond. You shouldn't be making them in darkness under extreme pressure. And if you're using these kinds of techniques, it's going to help you a lot more to be able to make those choices a lot more easily. So that is the end of my talk.
Hello there, it's Fab here, and I just wanted to say hi. By the power of time traveling, which I totally have, I want to say I hope you enjoyed this session. This is one of our workshops from summer school. And if you missed out on one of your tickets, then what are you waiting for? Just go and check out in the description if you can still access all of our summer school sessions, old and new. Yes, there are still some tickets left for summer school. Right now, at time of recording, by the time you're watching this, you better check. And why would you? Well, because it's 9 weeks of free, amazing events. And for the whole duration of summer school, you get access to all of the replays for free. After that, we're going to move all of our lovely replays to our all access pass and student community, which you can also check in the link in the description. So what are you waiting for? Go and check out all of our other sessions from summer schools and our amazing speakers. In the meantime, don't forget to be kind to yourself and others, and practice makes progress. Until next time, class is dismissed.